Hey there, welcome back to another video from Hobbies and Stuff in the Shed. So today we're going to be taking a look at a fun little project. Shouldn't be too quick, so just bear with me for a minute while I get you set up inside the shed. Alright, so for this project, what we're going to do, I am going to start doing these YouTube videos, and I thought, well, if I'm going to start recording videos, I'm going to need to have a camera, tripod, that kind of thing. So here is a simple, basic Amazon Basics tripod that I got. And it came in this cheap, basic carrying bag. Which, you know, it does the trick. But I figured I've got a wall full of leather stuff. Let me show you. Got a whole shelf full of all this fun leather. Let's make use of it. Let's do something a little fun. Let's make a better carrying case for this thing. Why not, right? So, here's the plan. We're going to take a couple quick little measurements. We're going to make a new bag to replace this one. And we'll go from there, see what happens. Okay? So, this bag measures okay, so this bag is going to measure about 17, maybe 18 inches long, and it has a gusset that is 2.5 inches wide, and it looks like, let's see if I can get a measuring tape out here. Let's see here. Looks like it is gonna be, so if I spread this out, we're looking at about 7 inches. Okay. That makes sense, because if this is about 2.5, okay, so if that's about 2.5, well, hey, you know what? Let's do this by our straight edges. Okay, so I got 2.5 that way, and then 3. Okay, so 3, 6, and then so that's 3 and 3 is 6. 2.5 makes 8.5. So you know what? Let's round it to 9 inches. Okay, so let me find a pen and paper here to write this down. Okay, so we're going to sketch this out here. So I'm going to have this centerpiece, which is going to be, let's say, okay, so it's 14 inches. Wait, no, is that right? 16. Okay, so that is 16. And then the side here is 3. So then it's 3 inches here. So that's 16 and that's 3. And this was 2.5. So our center piece here basically needs to be, so it needs 3, and then 16, and then 3. Okay, so that's going to get me 19, 21. So 21 inches long in total. Okay. And now this is 2.5, so let's make that 2.5. And let's add 1/4 of an inch to each side in order to cover off our margins for the stitching line. So really, that's going to be 21.5 by 3. Okay, so our center gusset here is going to be 21.5 by 3. And then this part that goes around, so if that is 3, and that's basically, so if that's 3, and then 6, and then 8.5, add 1/4 inch to each side, so that's going to be 6.5, 1/4 inch on either side, another 1/2 of an inch, so that's 7 inches. That sound right? Yeah, so 3 is 6, 8.5, and then a 9. So we need 9 inches by the 16 inches, plus 1/4 inch for the, so 16.5. Okay, so if I'm doing this right, we are going to have a center piece, which is going to be 21.5 inches long by 3 inches wide. And then we're going to have a piece that goes around the edges, and it's going to be 16.5 by 9. So I'm going to have one that's going to be 16.5 by 9, and then the other one is going to be 21.5 by 3. And this is the one that's going to have our zipper in the middle. Okay. And this one, we're going to cut a little corner out in order to make it easier to turn around the edges. That'll make sense when we get there, I swear. Okay, so this is going to be relatively straightforward. So we're going to have one rectangle is 16.5 by 9, and one rectangle is 21.5 by 3. That doesn't sound too bad. Now, let's double check, and let's do another way to check and make sure that these measurements are going to work. So if I measure my tripod, that is going to be, so this will fit inside of 18 inches. Okay. And then by 4 inches. You know what? Let's run with it. Let's see what happens. What's the worst that could happen, right? Okay, so give me a minute. I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to clear the table off. I've got a bit of a mess here, and then I will be back in just a moment. Okay, so table's all cleaned off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do this in like a two-tone color, because I have some of this brown honey leather, a little bit of a scrap of this here, and I've got some of this really cool green leather here. So I think the two of these together is going to make for a really cool looking sort of thing. Okay? So from our plans, we want one piece that's going to be 21.5 by 3, and that's going to have our zipper in the middle, and one that's 16.5 by 9. So we're going to get, so I love using my old trusty carpenter square. It's one of the things I really enjoy about doing leatherwork is that you don't necessarily always need to get stuff from the leatherworking place and all the fancy tools that say, you know, specific for leatherworking and all that stuff. You can always just get stuff at Princess Auto, or for you Americans out there, Harbor Freight. So 21.5 by 3. So mark myself my straight line here. So if I go 3 inches this way, okay, so there's my 3. And, oh, that's not quite going to work. You know what, let's turn this around this way. Okay. So if I get this thing set up properly. Oh, you know what? I don't know if I have 21.5 inches on this piece. Okay, alright, well this piece is going to be my 16.5 by 9 then. Alright, so pull that down there and there. Okay, so here's 9, and here is 16.5. Okay. And then over here, and then I got, this will be 9, and this will be 16.5, and 9. Okay. There we go. So that is that piece marked out. Okay. So one really cool thing about this particular leather is that it takes really well to the scratch off. Then we want this next one to be 21.5 by 3. Should be able to get that out of the bottom of this here. Okay. Yes. Okay. So now this one's already got a mostly straight cut at the bottom, but it's got a bit of a curve at the bottom here, so I'm going to make a new straight line. So 21.5. Nope, there's a 3. Okay. One and a half by 3. Okay. So now that we know that those pieces are going to measure out, so this one's going to have our zipper on it. Actually, this is going to work out really well. Okay, so now let's get our utility knife out. And let's cut these pieces off. Okay. Okay. And up here at this end. There we go. Okay, so this can go back on the shelf. You can use this somewhere else. And then this, let's trim this piece off here. Okay. And we might wind up using some of those in a minute. And then I want to go here. Okay. So what I think I'm going to do with these, I think would be really neat, is on the ends of this bag, if I fold these over and put like a 1-inch ring in them, that'll give us a good place to tug and like have like an anchor for a shoulder strap. So we're going to set these aside and we're going to save them for later on. Okay, so here's this piece. Next, what we want to do is cut out our brown piece, our body piece here. Okay. And this leather is, I want to say, about maybe 3 ounces. So it's not too thick for what we're going to be doing here. And it's not too thin either. I think it's going to be just right. I find a lot of things that I do, a 3 ounce winds up being not a bad weight for quite a lot of things that I do actually. Now these two particular leathers, I got them from Tandy Leather. I think one was called a honey brown and one was called like a freckled green or something, like a chrome tan glossy green. And I did look up the SKU numbers before I started recording, and unfortunately they are out of production now, and you're not able to get them, which is too bad, but what can you do? Okay, so we're going to set this aside for later, because that's a fair size chunk. We can make something out of that later. Okay, so let's throw these into the scrap bin. And let's get that piece of the green right rectangle back out. Where did I put you? Here we are. Okay, so next what we want to do is we want to find where our zipper is going to go. So on our example bag here, the way this one's done is the zipper starts at this spot here, and then it goes around the curve and then down. It cuts off about halfway. And I figure, well, there may not be a need to reinvent the wheel here. It seemed to work fine on this one. Actually, I wonder if I could even just tear that out and repurpose it. Maybe I'll do that for another video. But let's get my zipper. Okay, so I've got a bin here full of zippers. That's not a bad idea. Don't really like the purple. This green, that's a fairly strong zipper. It'll match the green and the brown that we're going for. Oops. And actually, that looks like it might be just the thing for... I didn't realize it was going to do that. Okay, so let's see here. Do I have a better one? Oh, okay, so some of these, so I didn't realize this. I have some zippers that have this little stop at the end so I can put them on and off. And I've got some zippers that are just closed like that. You know what? Let's use this black one. And if we compare the one that's on here, so that looks to be very similar in size. I got one that might be a little bit longer. Oh yeah, there we go. That'll take me like all the way across that whole green section, right? So if I do this, that zipper will carry me the whole way down the length of our bag. That is perfect. Okay, so now what we need to do is let's find our wing dividers so that we can mark our distances for that. Okay, and let's put the zipper box off to the side, put this off to the side, and let's get our measuring tool back out. Okay, so this is 3 inches wide, so our center point is at the 1.5 inch mark. So we're going to mark 1.5 inches here. Don't know if the camera's going to pick up on that, but I got a silver little dot there, my marking pen, for my 1.5 inches. Okay, and then mark 1.5 inches in the middle here, and about halfway across here, and about there. Okay, so now we're going to draw a center line across the middle. Hold on. Okay. Now, if this was something that I was making to sell to somebody, I wouldn't leave the marking line quite as visible. But since I'm doing this just for myself, then I don't really care too much. And it's interesting that I've got a couple dots that are just above my center line here, so that means that I've gone a little wider than I originally intended. But that's not too bad though, because my true center line on the edges, that's the important bit. Now, what I want to do is measure out where I want my zipper to go. So let's start my zipper opening. You know what? Let's try and make this quasi-symmetrical. Let's measure 1.5 inches in from here. And let's measure 1.5 inches in from this edge. And does that line up with the length of the zipper, or close to it? Yeah, that's pretty close to it. Okay, so now what we're going to do, so this is a rotary punch that has different size and shaped holes on it. So you got some oval punches of different sizes, which is pretty cool. So I got this off of AliExpress, and what I really like about it is it's going to take some of the guesswork out of here. So if I go to this punch size here, for example, that's going to be just about the right size to expose the zipper teeth on there. See? Okay, so I'm going to punch out a hole here on my center line, and then over here on my center line. Okay, now I'm going to take my utility knife and I'm going to cut a gap in between the two of them. So lining it up to the edges. Okay. And actually, you know what? On this utility knife, I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. It's actually getting kind of dull. I'm going to flip this over and see if I've got a better one on the other side. Might not. You know what? I'm going to get a new blade. So, bear with me for a second while I go and throw this into the sharp stick bin. Alright, nice shiny new blade. This should make this cut like butter. Now I'm going to have to angle this so I'm above the cutting, so I don't want to screw this up. Okay, so just straight down like this towards me. Okay, and then that cut like butter. Perfect. Okay, and there. Oh, you know what? I don't like that. That was shifting a bit on me. Oh, bother. Okay. you know what I did? When I made that initial hole, it wasn't exactly in the center. Okay. Alright, so yeah, okay, so I'm a little wide at the one end, a little narrow at the other end, but that still gives me enough room on the edges to bite into the sewing line for my zipper. Alright, well, I am learning as you are on this. This is the first time I've done something quite like this before. Sometimes the first time you do something winds up being a little rough, and that's alright. Not the end of the world. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our wing divider and we're going to mark our stitching line along the inside where our zipper is going to go. So okay, there we go. And then, you know what? Right while we have our wing divider in our hand, let's mark our stitching line along all the edges of this thing. Now, this particular leather, I don't know if the camera's picking up on it or not, but it's because it's got a glossy sheen to it. It does make it a little hard to see exactly what you're doing in the light. You have to kind of like look at it a little bit in order to see just exactly what I'm doing. Hopefully the camera's not flashing on it too much, but I swear it's going to look really cool when it's done. Okay? So let's mark our stitching line on this as well. Okay. And something I am curious about, if I take our tripod here and I lay it on top, yeah, that looks like it'll just about fit. And then if I pull this up, So looks like it looks like it won't be too bad. And then once you get this on top, oh, you know what? I have a feeling this might wind up being a hair too small for this. We might want to add an extra inch or two on the end. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We are going to add an extra inch. No, extra. Yeah, we're going to add an extra 2 inches on the end. So we'll do 1 and 1. So we'll do 1 inch along here, 1 inch along here. We're going to make one extra 1 inch piece on each of these, extend them all out by 1 inch. Because I am worried that this is not going to quite fit. I believe my initial measurements were a little short. Okay, so let's do that then. So, good thing we kept these around. So this, if I measure out, so this one was 3 by 1, okay, so okay, so here is my 3-inch mark, here's my 1-inch mark, here's my 2-inch mark. That way, and then 1 there, 2 there. Okay. Okay. And for this, let me see if I can find my scissors. Alright, so let's trim you up here. Okay. And let's give this its own stitching line. Okay. There we go. And so now I'm at a point where I'm starting to get a bunch of loose pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a bin to put some of this stuff into. There we go. Okay. And this one is 9 inches. So, let's get this back out. And I want to go okay, so I can do 9 inches this way. And then I can flip this over. There's my 9 inches there. There's my 1 inch mark. And there's my 1 inch mark. And there's that 1 inch mark. Okay, this one I'm going to use a utility knife because this is a little bit longer of a cut. Okay, and let's give you a new stitching line. Okay. There. Okay. So, now, the important thing is that when we punch our stitching holes, we have to make sure that these are going to line up. So, let's start with the easy punching holes first. The easy stitching holes is going to be for our zipper, because with the ones along the zipper, it does not need to match up to anything. It just needs to run along where the zipper is going to go. So, that's going to be pretty easy, pretty straightforward to do. Okay. And for the spacing, so I have a 4mm spacing and a 3mm spacing and what I believe is a 6mm, which is actually almost the same as the 4mm. So you can kind of see that there. So the tricky bit with your stitching chisels is the Tandy stitching chisels measures it as distance in between the prongs, whereas a lot of these style of stitching chisels measure the distance between the tips. So, something to keep in mind. Personally, I really like my Tandy ones, and I'm going to go with my 4mm spacing on this job, because, okay, so here's something to keep an eye out, especially because I do everything by hand, right? So if you can save time where you can. So the 4mm spacing and the 3mm spacing. So you see how the 4mm, these are both a 2, 4, 6. These are both a 6-prong spacing. But you see how that 4mm is going to give me just that extra little bit of spacing? Okay. So what that means is for every 6 holes that I punch, I'm basically going to get an extra one. So when I go to do the sewing, it's going to be just a little bit faster because I'm going to have fewer holes to sew through. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, a lot of patterns that you buy online are going to be set for a 3mm or 6mm. Like the spacing's going to change depending on the pattern maker, right? So that's why I've got a handful of different options here. But for this job, I'm going to go with these guys because it's going to make my life just a couple minutes quicker. Alright, now this is the fun part. Actually, you know what? I don't know if you can tell in the video, but I'm kind of bent over on the table here. It's just a couple inches shorter. But right over there, I've got my work table, which is just a half a foot taller. It's going to be perfect if I'm going to be standing around all the time. So I am going to be right back in a few more minutes. Alright, so I am back now from punching my stitching holes along for the zipper. So here's what we need to do for our next step, is gluing the zipper onto the back. So what I like to do, oh hey, there's some tape on the back of this from another time I was doing something on this. Let's peel that tape off. Okay, so what I like to do with my zippers, some people like to run glue all the way along and then it's both glued and sewn together. What I like to do is I like to just do like a spot dabbing of the glue, and then that way if I make a mistake, then it's not very hard to pull it back up. So here's what we're gonna do here. Okay. So we're gonna take a little bit of this EcoFlow leather glue, and I'm just gonna do a couple dabs along here, because the main idea behind this is I just want it to be secure just enough to stay in place while I do my stitching. Just want to do a couple little spots. And then what we do is we take this and we just gently place it across the top so that it'll sit above our zipper. Okay, now this needs to sit for like a good couple of hours in order for that glue to really settle in and dry up for me. So what I'm going to wind up doing is I'm going to leave it overnight, and I'll come back to that in the morning, and that'll be done enough that I can do that sewing. So next, what we're going to do is I'm going to move the camera rig over to the other table, and I'll show you how I'm going to match up our little 1-inch strips that we made. So just bear with me for a minute. Alright, so here's where we are now. So the challenge that we have at this point is that we want to make sure that these line up and are going to be on there evenly. So here is how we are going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to go from the corner of the stitch line, and we're going to make sure that we match the same number of punches on both pieces. So we're going to be punching through both pieces side by side in order to make sure that they line up. Now, because they are both the same measurement, they're both the same 9-inch length, they should equal out to the exact same number of punches. But doing it this way, you make sure that you don't wind up being 1 or 2 extra. Okay, so yeah, see here my spacing is just slightly off. Just want to go down here and here. And I'm going to go back 1. Back 1. Okay. And in order to make sure that I don't get these two sides mixed up, I'm going to do something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marking pen here, and I'm just going to do a little A and A right there in the corner. So what that's going to do is that's then going to make sure that I know that those are together. And once the other really cool thing about this marking pen, if you haven't ever used a marking pen before, it just rubs right off. And if it's been on there for a couple of weeks, you can just take spit on your thumb and rub it off, or like a damp towel, that kind of thing. But this way, it's not going to hurt anything. In fact, I've had some stuff where I've written on the back and then I can barely even read it myself 2 days later. So there's that. And then the other piece is going to be our B piece. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to make sure that this lines up. So this is going to give like a slight overlap. It's gonna add like a bit of an odd look to the finished piece, but I have faith. I have faith that it'll be okay. Okay. So do that there and there. There and there. Okay, so these are lining up quite nicely. Okay. And we are going to do our B marker on this one. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing for the green piece after the zipper has glue is dried. And then what we're going to do is we're going to stitch these together like this so that it overlaps on top. And then we're going to go across and we're going to do that next stitching line. So I want to wait until I get my green pieces together first before I do that. But I can start by stitching these two together. So now let's choose our color of thread. Okay. So here is, we've got this green and this brown. And here is my toolbox of threads. So we get to pick what color we're going to go with for our thread here. Okay, so let's see here. Yes, I think so. We can either do like a green on green and brown. That might not be so bad. And actually, I haven't really used this green much at all, so it would be a good chance to use some of it up. The red, it's a little too Christmassy for me. I'm not really in a Christmas mood for this one. Now, white, we could do white, and white would definitely stand out. I think, now this one here is not going to be enough on this for the whole project, so I'm not going to do that. You know what? Yeah, let's do, it's either green or my chocolate brown. You know what? Let's do the green. The green will stand out. And honestly, actually, to be perfectly honest, because we're going to wind up, yeah, we're not really going to be seeing all that too much. Yeah, let's do our green one here. So let's put this away for a minute. Okay. Got my pin cushion. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to pick my needles from my pin cushion. Okay, let's go with, let's see here. Yeah, go with these ones. There and there. And then we're gonna measure out the length of thread that we need. Go about 2 times the distance, and then a little bit more. Give me lots of extra space. And then from here, we're just going to do a simple saddle stitch. Okay. So, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this part overlap over the top of the other part. So our smaller piece is going to be on top of the bigger piece. And then away we go from here with the stitching. Okay, so this video is already long enough. We don't need to make it any longer by making you watch me do a whole bunch of saddle stitching. So I am going to pause the recording here, and then I'll see you again in, for you, a quick second. For me, maybe a little bit longer.